Senator Lucio, for what purpose? I'm taking them in order, Senator.
Gentlemen, yield for...
Do you yield?
Absolutely, to my chairman.
I've been listening to the debate, Senator, and you know, in the early 1990s, I think Senator West and I and Senator Nelson, we all got together, and every member of the Senate was in favor, and we gave then Governor Bullock the green light to put together his blue ribbon committee statewide to study the tax system in our state. And they never got off the ground. Never got off the ground because people just didn't want to do anything to change, you know, tradition or what was going on. Even though they complained about it, they didn't want to have anything to do with allowing the public of this state to know specifically what was going on in our tax system. And I know why. But when you say that the people of Texas, 71%, I just heard,
yes, sir,
are against the state income tax, who did that poll, first of all?
That was the Texas Tribune and the University of Texas.
And what kind of language did they use on their, you know, if I'm a taxpayer out there, property taxpayer, which I am, several pieces of property,
sure,
not much, but I pay taxes. And somebody comes to me and say, hey, we want to set up a state income tax. Another tax? That's the first reaction. Those 71% that voted against having a state income tax would say, because whoever polled them, excuse me, it depends how they're asked. Wait a minute, and let me just finish if I may. Let me finish if I may. But if somebody calls me and says, you know what, Mr. Garcia or Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones, we're going to study, you know, our tax system in Texas, and we're going to try to figure out what the best or the fairest way to approach taxes is, so that we can fund public education, so we can build, you know, highways and all. And if somebody tells me there might be a chance to do away with all property taxes and establish a state income tax where everybody gets to pay, if they make any money, they pay a little tax, okay, depending on how much they make. If they ask me that, I would say, well, do the study. I wish you had a study instead of just an election and I don't know what you're gonna, you know, what's gonna go on is in terms of wording, you know, for this HJR that's going to come out in an election that's coming in November if this passes. If somebody just says, you know, proposing the Constitution amendment prohibiting the imposition of individual income tax, of course I'm going to vote for it. I don't want another tax of any kind.
We're glad to have you on board.
No, you're not listening.
I am. I'm
Senator,
being facetious.
You and I spoke about this. We need to be truthful to the public. We need to not mislead them. We need to give them a clear picture. We need more clarity. If they're going to vote to not having a state income tax in the future, they're shutting down an option for other legislatures to address in the future if need be. I'm not for shutting down options. I'm against the state income tax. I've been against it from day one. Now, if they tell me that they're going to do away with all property taxes, then I would consider, I would pay my fair share taxes just like anyone else, depending on what they make. But you have to be clear about how we're going to address this issue at the polls, because people are going to read this and say, oh, I just can't afford another tax. And they're going to vote against it. And you're going to get your HJR approved. And it's going to go into the Constitution. No state income tax in Texas. But if you at least have the discussion somehow and explain to them that there might be a possibility, or I don't know if that's possible now, because when you talked about legislative intent a while ago, I wanted to hear you say, it is my intent to make sure that whatever is placed in that wording for this is clear to the public that there won't be a state income tax unless we do away with some other major tax that we all have to face, and we're talking about property taxes. So I think if people that own 2-3 pieces of property
All 19 hours now.
would have a chance between doing away with those taxes that they have to face every year and paying a state income tax, that would probably rather pay a 1%, 2%, 3% state income tax than the high prices on the, they're going out through the ceiling because of valuations. Taxes are going up, and they'll continue to go up, unless we reform, it even more than what we're going to be doing this session. We're doing a good job this session, but we're still not there. And I'm concerned about going to the polls and just having one option, saying yes or no to a state income tax, and closing on an option for future legislators.
Senator, if I can address a very good point and question that you made, because polls can be very, there can be push polls, and there can be ones that are really exist to get a certain result. Sure. And we all don't like those because they're not instructive. I mean, you can ask something in such a way that you always get 100% of the time you're going to get the results you want. What I found interesting in this poll, so I want to be clear to you and all the other members, exactly the poll question that was asked by the Texas Tribune and UT. And I think we could argue, or certainly agree rather, that they didn't have an agenda with this. They really were just looking to see what the intent. So they didn't ask, because if you did, anybody conducted a poll that simply asked Texans or anyone else that didn't, the other 7 states or so that don't have an income tax, do you want one? Of course that's going to be overwhelming no, most of the time. But that's not what they asked. This is what's so interesting. They asked, should Texas create a statewide income tax to fund public education? And we're all for public education. So if they had just asked, should Texas create a statewide income tax, I would suspect that we would get the numbers that we got. But I find it fascinating that they didn't only say that, they also included something that we're pretty much universally all for and support, which should Texas create a statewide income tax to fund public education. And the results would, 71% of all Texans said they shouldn't even consider it.
The reason they said that, Senator, you and I know it, is because they're saying, I'm already paying property taxes that goes for education. I already get my tax bill from ISDs, and I'm paying taxes for why should I have to institute another tax on myself? But if you word it where, we could have a state income tax if property taxes were done away with, then it'd be another matter.
Like a swap, like we had just discussed politically, we were discussing in both chambers whether we do a swap and sales tax for property taxes, and that didn't seem to be that popular, in the public either. And the thing that I found fascinating about, I think, a very fair question that was done in this poll was, it doesn't matter how you break it down demographically, whether you just isolate out the Democrats, the Independents, the Republicans, ethnically, if you African Americans, Hispanics, whites, it was overwhelming in every single, even by age, categorically, that they were not going to even want to consider by 3 to 1, 5 to 1, sometimes 11 to 1 margins.
Well, I'm going to end the discussion because there are bills that are going to be dying, important bills that we should be discussing. This should be a study, not a constitutional amendment.
Senator,
and let me just finish with this. If I had a chance, seriously, I'd keep paying my property taxes, and I would gladly pay state income taxes out of my salary to go to education only. But that's not going to happen, okay? Because this is going to pass. Because you're not giving us an opportunity to decide on either or, and that's fine. I don't think the public of Texas is ready for another tax. I personally wouldn't mind paying another tax if I knew that tax would bring the funding for public education where it should be, #1 in the nation. And a growing population like Texas, I wouldn't mind paying more taxes. But people can't afford it unless you take away something that they're already paying. and swap it. And that's not going to happen because I know the wording on this HJR is not going to allow them to even think that. So I think this is going to pass. I'm going to vote against it not because I'm for a state income tax, not at all, but because we're shutting the door on future legislators and the possibility of doing away with property taxes in the future and into choosing another tax. And it could be this. I won't be around to see it, but you know, I'm glad that we're at least discussing it because people will remember this discussion.
Senator, thank you so much for your comments. I appreciate them very much. And just to kind of end in addressing a couple of points that you made, was there are only 7 states in the country that don't have an income tax right now. And because of that, we attract a lot of business that we wouldn't otherwise get. So let's say you've got, like Toyota, for instance, that came from California to Texas. There's a lot of high income earners, and I think you'd agree we'd rather have them in Texas than in California.
No, we don't
we'll
have
take
it.
that. Because high income earners are also going to then pay taxes, they're going to buy homes, they're going to buy goods, etc. And then there's a lot of ancillary benefits with suppliers and things of that nature. So the thing is, that's great when you have a high income earner that comes to Texas, because California's highest state income tax right now, the margin I think is almost 14%, it's 13 and change, is when they come here to Texas, they can choose really the property taxes they can pay by the value of the home that they purchase. Do they want to pay less in property taxes when they get here? They can buy a $400,000 home instead of an $800,000, even if they can afford it.
Senator, we don't have a state income tax, and we're not going to have one. So this legislation is not needed. Not in our lifetime, anyway.
Well, like what Senator Johnson and I had discussed earlier was, you know, it can attract a lot more growth, and growth is good because growth fills our coffers. All boats rise on a high tide. And as far as shutting the door goes, and we can, you know, end it here, and thank you so much, is that moving forward, a future legislature can certainly pass a constitutional amendment, as we did in 1993, as we potentially are doing here, and in the future. I think we passed 2 yesterday, so it happens every legislative session that they get the 2/3. So the door is going to still be open. The bar just be a little bit higher. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.